started.
Okay, very good. So today's presentation is about fall treatment opportunities for trees. Before we jump into that, a little bit about myself. I am Emmett Muennink, the South Central Technical Manager for Arborjet. I have been with Arborjet for 6 years, which seems, I guess they say time flies when you're having fun. And so it doesn't seem like that long, but I really enjoy what I do. I get to train arborists, landscapers, lawn care companies, you name it, anybody that's interested in caring for trees. I get to go out there and help them do so. And I really enjoy what I do. I've been with Arborjet for 6 years. Prior to that, I was the plant healthcare manager for a Dallas area tree care company, where basically that means I did a little bit of everything. I was I had plant healthcare technician duties myself. I managed some technicians. I ground stumps, I climbed trees, I diagnosed trees, I sold tree work. You name it, I've kind of done it in the tree care world. I became a certified arborist in 2011. And then at the end of 2017, I achieved the designation of board certified master arborist. And so what that means is that I'm just a super big tree nerd. My education is really geared towards plant and soil science. Through college, I took no tree care courses. It was all agronomy and crop science. So plant soil sciences, growing things, pesticides, fertilizers, things like that. But with my education and my work background, I've kind of combined those two things with my career at Arborjet and really just enjoy plant health care and teaching people about my experiences. Okay, so first, a little bit about Arborjet. The first thing with tree injection in Arborjet is that spraying has become less accepted by the public. Depending on where you are in the United States, people have become very pesticide adverse. And you could be spraying water onto your trees, and people would be concerned about that because it looks like a pesticide drift happening. And so with tree injection, it is limiting that environmental exposure. And not only that, with injections, we are able to be much more effective than insecticides that are sprayed. We have university-backed research on all of our products. We utilize the Arbor plug, which is part of our state-of-the-art equipment. It seals everything inside the tree. When you inject a tree, you want it to be inside. You don't want any leakage. And so that's part of why we use the Arbor plug. Tree injection gives us a wider treatment window, and that's really what the basis of this presentation is about, is to extend our treatment window and make sure that we can treat later into the year. We can treat where other methods aren't an option. Parks, playgrounds, schools, waterways, windy areas where you can't spray. Tree injection, none of that comes into play. Everything's sealed inside the tree. With Arborjet, we have an excellent team providing customer service for you and your team. We have a great staff at the corporate office, and then we have regional people. No matter what state you're in, you can find somebody that can help answer your questions. And even if it's after hours, you can, say you're on the East Coast, you can try somebody on the western half of our team, and they'll help you answer your questions. And lastly, I have this underlined: increase your profitability and deliver expected results. When you are hired by somebody to take care of their trees, they have expectations of you. We carry ourselves with those same expectations. We want you to be successful with what you're doing, and we want to help you get there. So everything that we do for you through education and training and providing these products, it all boils down to helping you be successful. And so how can we help you do that? Just ask. And we want to help you get there. So into this presentation, we're talking about fall treatment opportunities. Just a short list of what I'll be going over today is pine bark beetles, pine wilt disease, EAB, diplodia, sycamore anthracnose, apple scab, chlorosis, drought, and a little bit on deep root feeding. So there are certain insect pests that you can treat at this time of the year, as well as leaf diseases. and nutritional deficiencies. Before we jump into specific insects, I just want to highlight our new product, Triage R10. If you're not aware of this product already, you need to do some homework. This is the latest and greatest thing for tree care. Our original product, Triage, is a 4% imimectin benzoate. Triage R10 is a 9.7% active ingredient. This means we're able to treat the same trees with 60% less formulation. And so we're able to treat trees much more efficiently, especially conifers and pine trees. It is amazing. I don't know how else to describe it, but being able to treat pine trees in a matter of minutes compared to hours is just unprecedented, and it's just fantastic. So we're able to treat pine trees, ash trees, you name it, in a much shorter amount of time. Another cool feature of this product is that it is labeled to be mixed with our fungicide Propazol. And so when you're in the West Coast and you're dealing with bark beetles that are also vectoring a blue stain fungus, having the capability to mix these two products together and you're able to tackle both problems with one treatment is just unreal. So check out Triage R10 if you're not already familiar with it. And just to highlight the last bullet point that I have up here, it is sold in pints because it is such a high percentage of active ingredient, but 1 pint of Triage R10 actually goes further than a quart of a 4% product at an equivalent dosage. So Triage R10, if you haven't seen it, look into it. If you want more information, reach out to myself or or the technical representative for your area. All right, so we're gonna jump right into pine bark beetles. If you're in an area with pines, there's several different species that can attack and affect pine trees. In my area, I'm in Texas. The biggest problem we have is with the Ips engraver beetles. They attack higher up on the pine trees, and generally they attack pines that are drought stressed. Other parts of the countries, you may be dealing with some of the dendroctonous species, which you see on the lower half of this slide. So mountain pine beetle, black turpentine beetle, and the southern pine beetle are all dendroctonous species. And actually, if you translate dendroctonous, what that means is tree killer. And so those are capable of attacking and killing healthy trees. Looking at this diagram here, what it shows is that the size of the beetle matters. And so the Ips species are much smaller. A smaller beetle can fly higher in the atmosphere. And so they're flying higher up and they hit higher up on the trees. Whereas the dendroctonous species are larger and they hit lower down on the bole of the tree. So like the black turpentine beetle or the red turpentine beetle, you're gonna see their damage lower down on the bole within a few feet of the soil level. Whereas an Ips engraver, you're gonna see that way up maybe 80, 90 feet up in that pine tree. So the size of the beetle matters, and it kind of can be an indication of what type of beetle is attacking your tree. Going back to some of the early research done on triage and the effectiveness of it is the Texas Forest Service. So this data here is showing they injected trees with triage, they waited a month, they came back with pheromones and actually baited the trees. They were attracting pine bark beetles to the trees within the study. And so what this graph is showing is we had 2 different rates, a low and a high rate of triage, and then we had an untreated control. And so they baited all the trees, and after 25 months, what they found is that even at the low rate of triage, they only had 4% mortality compared to 86% mortality of the untreated trees. This shows a visual of that. So on the left-hand side, you have the control that was untreated. The beetles were able to colonize that tree. You can see they've kind of highlighted the galleries in purple. And then on the right-hand side, you have the triage-treated tree. And as soon as that adult beetle hit the tree and tried to tunnel in, it took a bite of that active ingredient and was paralyzed essentially. And so they weren't able to colonize the tree, and the tree was able to go on about its business. The next disease on pine trees that can be treated in the fall is pine wilt disease. This is a very common disease throughout the Midwest United States. It affects the non-native species, the Scotch and Austrian pines. And in a lot of areas, these trees have basically been removed from the landscape because of this disease. It is a disease complex. It involves a wood borer, a nematode, and a fungus. This is the kind of stuff that plant pathologists just love because it's so complicated, and all these things are working in tandem, and pathologists just love that kind of stuff. So the first symptom that you're going to see is called flagging, wherever you see one or two branches dying scattered throughout the tree. And within a few weeks of seeing those symptoms, the tree will die. Those trees, if you see dead trees that are Scotch or Austrian, they need to be taken out immediately because they just serve as a source of infection for the neighboring trees. Now, what is really killing the trees is the pinewood nematode. What's fascinating about this nematode is that it's actually an aerial nematode. Through all of my education, learning about plant soil sciences, I heard a lot about soil-borne nematodes that would invade the root system of the plant. And so learning about this one is just fascinating, that it can actually be traveled, it can be carried by an insect and move into the above ground tissue of a tree. It's just very interesting. Nematodes go from egg to adult very quickly, 3 to 5 days. That's why whenever you start to see that flagging of a tree, it's too late. That tree needs to come out already. And so what happens is this nematode actually swims up and down the vascular system of these pine trees. It has a blue stained fungus with it, and the tree is just shutting down, trying its best to stave off this infection. The tree has to shut down its own vascular system. The problem with that is that even after the tree has died completely, that blue stain takes over, and the nematode can actually feed on the blue stain and survive. And so when a new wood borer, like it's the pine sawyer beetle, comes in and starts eating this dead tree, the nematodes will attach itself to the pine sawyer beetle, and then it'll move it to another tree. The pine sawyer beetle, there's 2 known species in the Midwest. They are non-diaposing insects, which means they don't have a set life cycle. You can find larvae and adult at the same time throughout the growing season. Egg to adult in 2 months, and they're most active during the summer months. They are an opportunistic pest, which means they like to eat on dead and dying trees or stressed out trees. And so that's why they're a perfect vector for the pinewood nematode, is because they're going to go in and they're going to start eating the wood of these dead trees. The nematodes attach themselves to that insect, even as a larva. So basically the nematodes get into the larval stage of this insect, and when it pupates into an adult, they're still on it. The adult will fly off and begin to feed on the shoots of healthy trees. And so the nematode will actually invade down through the shoots of healthy trees. And so that's how the disease manifests itself. So just some management strategies here. If it's brown, cut it down, get rid of it. What's dead is dead. We cannot change that. But we can protect the surrounding healthy trees. With triage, it's been shown to be very, very effective, not only against the nematode, but also the wood borer vector. So just to read this quotation down at the bottom of the screen, it says, pine treatments with imamectin benzoate, none of the treated trees died. I'm gonna move my screen here. Died during a period of more than 2 years. The situation differed in the control plot. By May of 2011, a total of 25 trees, or 33%, had died. The pine wilt nematode was detected in 76% of those dead trees, with attacks of the bark beetle detected in all dead pines. So this shows that it's super effective against the nematode and bark beetles and the Sawyer beetle. So if you're going to treat for this, go for the fall. Pines, their resin pressure reduces in the fall when it's cool outside. And that is the most challenging thing about injecting pine trees, is they have this resin that is just working against you. So whenever you drill into a pine tree, you have to drill, plug, and inject. If you wait until it's cold outside, that resin pressure greatly reduces and you're able to inject your material much more easily. The other thing is use the Triage R10. We're using a dose that's 60% lower than the 4% products, and so we're able to get that into the trees much more quickly. And as you can see here, the medium rate of both products, it's about the same cost per diameter inch. So go ahead and use the R10. You can also mix that with propofol, and so you're covering your bases for blue stain fungus, as well as diplodia, which I believe is the next thing we're going to be talking about here. So we're moving on to leaf diseases. Forgive me if I'm going fast here. There's a lot of different things you can do in the fall, so I'm just kind of hitting the high notes. So leaf diseases is another great opportunity for the fall of the year. Leaf diseases infect your trees early in the spring. And so if you can do these treatments in the fall, you can prevent them from happening. Normally, the normal disease management for leaf diseases is to spray multiple times during the spring. And so you're looking at 3 to 4 sprays during the spring months of the year. It's a big problem because the spring is usually a rainy part of the season. And so trying to line up all these sprays during the rainy part of the year is difficult. And if you miss one, you're basically, your whole program is shot. Doing a fall treatment widens up that application window. The first thing we're going to talk about is diplodia, tip blight on pines. So diplodia kills the tips of pine trees. So you can see in the bottom left photo, that tip is dead. It also has a stage of the disease that affects the cones. And so if you're seeing cones that look abnormal or infected, or you can see in the right hand photo, it's basically just all decayed, or it never fully developed. That's part of the disease cycle of diplodia. We've been working on diplodia for a long time, and we installed a trial back in 2015 in the fall up in Michigan, injecting propofol, which is our 14.3% propiconazole fungicide, into the trees. We did this when it was cold outside, again, to abate the resin pressure of the trees, injecting the trees at 5 milliliters per diameter inch. And what we found is 2 years of control from one treatment. This is totally different than the other management approaches for diplodia. We're able to treat one time in the fall, get 2 years of control, compared to spraying 3 to 4 times every spring. So basically in one application, we are negating the need for 8 sprays over the course of 2 years. And so when you look at this graph on the right-hand side of the slide, what you see is the blue and orange bars. That's showing, those are the trees that were treated with propofol. And the peach and red bars, the ones that were untreated. And so over the course of 2 years, we see a great decline in the amount of disease. And that stands to reason as you decrease in 1 year the amount of disease, there's less propagation that can occur in the following year. And so we're seeing a greater suppression of disease over the course of 2 years. So propofol, we introduced this product, I think, in 2015. It is the broadest spectrum, it has the broadest label of any propiconazole product on the market. It is technical ingredient from Syngenta. It is formulated to be applied as an injection, but it is also labeled to be applied as a spray. And so you can use this product to treat all sorts of things like oak wilt, Dutch elm disease, leaf anthracnose, diplodia tip blight, as well as spray control of all the different pathogens that it's labeled for. And because Arborjet owns this label, we've been continuing to research and find all the things that propiconazole is effective at treating, which is a broad spectrum of diseases. And so if you're not currently using Propizol, check it out. It is an amazing product. We continue to find more and more pathogens that it's effective against. Moving on to Sycamore anthracnose, which is another big problem throughout the Midwest United States, all the way out to the West Coast. The American sycamore is the most susceptible species to this pathogen. And a very common symptom is what you'll see is like the interior of the canopy of the sycamores defoliates in the spring, and you'll look at the top of the canopy and they look okay. So you can see in this photo on the right-hand side, the very tip top of this tree has very lush, full foliage, and the interior is kind of ratty looking. Year after year of infection of anthracnose, you're going to begin to see twig death and dieback, a reduction in tree vigor, and a susceptibility to other pests. So it kind of plays into the decline spiral of trees. This pathogen overwinters on infected twigs and branches, and the spores are moved in the springtime. When it starts to rain, it splashes those spores onto other parts of the tree and begins new infections. Cool, wet conditions favor the disease development, which is kind of synonymous with springtime, right? So cool, wet weather, springtime, it rains a lot. So that's what is spreading the disease. So you want to get your chemicals inside of the tree before that spread happens. And so if you can treat the trees in the fall, your chemical is going to still be there early in the spring and prevent those infections. So some of the common practices for sycamore anthracnose is to remove the leaf litter. So the disease is overwintering on the fallen leaves, so rake that up, get it out of there. Prune as much as practical because they have lesions on the stems that also help the disease to overwinter and spread in the spring. You want to maintain adequate moisture, which is going to improve the health of the trees. And then with your fungicides, inject in the fall or early spring. Doing these things in the fall is fantastic because you don't have to worry about it in the spring. Spring is a very busy time for everyone, not only for you as a tree care or lawn care provider, but also for homeowners. And so if you can go ahead and tackle these things in the fall, you just don't have to worry about it. It's off the to-do list. For best results, I recommend using both Propizol and our fungicide Phosphojet. Do this 2 years in a row in the fall, and then get on to an every other year program. And in the spring, fertilize the trees to improve vitality. So when we're looking at Propizol, you want to use 10 milliliters per diameter inch. The cost on that is approximately 70 cents per inch. Piggyback that at 5 milliliters per inch. And so you're looking at a total of $1.10 per inch plus 25 cents for an arbor plug. So $1.35 per inch to protect this tree from anthracnose. You go into the next year, the tree's going to look beautiful. You don't even have to worry about it. If you're not familiar with Phosphojet, it's a potassium phosphite. and they're effective. They have two modes. Potassium phosphate fungicides have two modes of action. The first is it is a direct fungicide to oomycete fungus. So that's like Phytophthora root rot or Pythium. But the secondary mode of action is it actually elicits a plant health response. It's kind of like a fertilizer type response. It boosts the tree's own defense system so that it can ward off diseases. And that's what we're going for when we're dealing with Sycamore Anthracnose, is we want that tree to be healthier. We want thicker cell walls so that that Anthracnose cannot invade and infect the trees. Moving on to our next fall treatment opportunity, which is Chlorosis. This is kind of a pet project of mine, back to my experience in agronomy. Chlorosis is a nutrient deficiency more often than not. So when we look into the soil pH and how it affects availability of nutrients, what we find is in alkaline soils, I highlighted here a pH of 8, which is pretty typical for the state of Texas. And it could be even higher as you move west through the United States. You see that iron, manganese, copper, boron, and zinc are all tied up in the soil. It's not that a soil lacks those nutrients, it's that they're bound up. They're tied to the soil particles and that the tree cannot access them. Now, I don't want you to think that Chlorosis is only a soil problem, because if we look back at this photo, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, you see some trees in the foreground that are yellow. That's Chlorosis. If you look behind them, there's a bunch of trees that are green. They look fine. So tree species really dictate the amount of nutrients that are needed. And so, yeah, your soil may be a high pH, and if you have a chlorotic tree, doesn't mean there's a problem with the soil. It means there's a problem with the tree. It's the wrong species for that site. So putting this together, there's a theory, or it's not really a theory, it's a proven theory. So it's actually become a law. It's called the law of minimum, which means that a plant's health or yield is directly tied to the greatest limiting factor in its growth environment. And so most of the time in agronomy, this is talked about in the terms of soil fertility. In trees, it becomes a much more encompassing theory. So if you look at this diagram on the left, you see a barrel that has a low rung. And let's just say that that low rung is on iron. So iron is the greatest limiting factor. The tree can never be healthier than it is because it has a lack of iron. So if iron is the only nutrient that we apply to this tree, it would bring that rung up only to the level that we have another limiting factor, which may be manganese, copper, boron, or zinc, right? Or perhaps there's something else. Perhaps it's in a parking lot island, or perhaps it's unirrigated. So maybe there's some other growth factors that cause another leak out of that barrel. And so what this kind of illustrates what we're talking about here. We need to address the full problem, not just a problem. So a few years ago, we introduced Arborjet FE. This is a much higher concentrated than our old formulation of Arborjet. It's 2% iron, 2% manganese. It has some potassium, copper, boron, and zinc. This will alleviate all of the nutrient deficiencies that are associated with a high pH soil and provide 2 to 3 years of green up. It's also really unique that it's labeled to be used as an injection, not only through the Arborjet equipment, but through any type of injection equipment that's out there. So here's some examples. This is a maple in western Kansas that was treated in October of 2019 using the high rate of Arborjet FE. So Maples generally are manganese deficient, where an oak is usually iron deficient. Here's the same tree, picture taken in June the following year. So just a tremendous response from there to there. And the fall is a fantastic time of the year to treat these trees. You're basically loading those trees up with nutrients in the fall. So when they leaf out in the spring, they have a great source of nutrients to pull on, and you'll see a tremendous green up response. Here's a set of oaks that I treated back in November of 2016. I treated the two on the left, and the one on the right underneath those street lamps was left as a untreated control. I came back in 2017. I was actually a little bit disappointed. I thought that I would see a much more visual result and improvement in these trees, but it got me thinking about that law of minimum. It's like, okay, I gave these trees all the nutrients they needed. Why do they still look like crap? And it's like, well, you know what? They're growing in a parking lot island. They have a very limited soil volume, and they were in really bad health before I started. And so for me to think that I would just pull them completely out of that in one treatment is kind of short-sighted. And so I treated them again in 2018, and I failed to take a picture. I apologize for that. But here's a photo of them back last year, June of 2019. And you can see what a difference it made just to give them the micronutrients that they needed. There's the untreated check on the right, and how poorly that tree looks. So even though they're in that limited and confined root space, just injecting the products that they needed has improved them so much. It's really a dramatic photo there. Now this is a tree. This tree is in my hometown, I guess, because it's right down the road from me. It's in an O'Reilly's parking lot. It started in 2015. I saw this tree, and I actually went in and talked to the manager of this O'Reilly's and asked him if I could treat the tree. And he kind of laughed me out the door. He said he was going to cut it down. And I said, well, just wait, let me treat it. And if it still looks bad next year, then cut it down. And so I injected it with a high rate of Menjet FE in the fall of 2015. And here's what it looked like in 2016. So just a huge improvement, but you can still see the amount of dieback on the tips. In 2017, so I did nothing. So I injected in 15, did nothing in 16, just took another photo. And you can see it's kind of reverting back to that chlorotic state. So it's in a tree coffin. It's in this parking lot island. It gets no irrigation, full sun exposure all day in the heat of Texas summer. And people are probably dumping chemicals on it, power steering fluid and antifreeze. Here it is in 2018. They had somebody come in and limb it up. It was reverting back to that chlorotic state, so I decided I would inject it again with Menjet FE. And I also decided to apply Shortstop, which is our plant growth regulator. That's applied as a soil drench. And that's what it was looking like in 2019, which I thought, I was just blown away when I saw it last year. I thought it just looked fantastic. Just a really good, for what it has gone through and the recovery that it's been in, is just really impressive. So from this photo in 2015 to what it was looking like last year, and then here it was just yesterday. I went and took another photo of it. So all of this is from basically 2 injections and 1 treatment of growth regulator. And this tree has come pretty much full circle in what I would consider some of the harshest conditions you could put a tree in. So treating for chlorosis, if you're using the high rate, and the fall is a great time to use the high rate, think of it as loading up the tree's nutrient bank with a high dosage, and then the tree is going to budget out what you put in there. So you put the high rate in the fall, that's going to last a lot longer than a low rate applied in the spring. Shortstop is going to limit that tree's growth. It's going to slow it down. When you have nutrient deficient trees, they cannot support the growth that they put on in the spring. And so when you slow it down, it allows that tree to pump its energy into other pathways and deal with those stresses and put on root development and just be able to thrive in these poor environments. You can use that high rate all the way up until the spring. You want to pull back and not treat trees when their leaves are tender. And so wait till the trees begin to kind of senesce or their leaves begin to change color. Go in with that high rate, and you can continue with that all the way up until they begin to put leaves on in the spring. So in the southern part of the United States, man, I can treat oak trees pretty much all winter long. Our temperatures are very mild here, but I want to pull off when I begin to see them putting on foliage. When you're using Minjet FE, make sure you clean your equipment. This product is corrosive, so make sure you clean it out. If you don't, you will be in trouble. It's going to gum up your quick jet air. It's going to corrode everything. So just make sure you clean it on the site. So after you finish your last tree for the day, go ahead and run cleaner through there, or water, something, flush out that chemical. Shortstop, this product is applied as a soil drench. Man, there's so many uses for this product. What it does is it inhibits the synthesis of gibberellic acid. And so what you can see in these photos here is on the top, we have a tree that was treated with Shortstop, a red oak, and it put on 4 inches of growth versus the untreated tree putting on 12 inches of growth. What a density and difference that make in the dark green leaves that you see, is just how thick that canopy looks. The tree energy theory is basically that trees put most of their growth potential and carbohydrates to use into shoot growth. And so what you can see here on the left-hand side is that 50% of a tree's energy is put into shoot growth. And the other 50% is divvied out to reproduction, root growth, defense compounds, and storage. Now with Shortstop, what we're doing is we are stopping that shoot growth. And so what happens is that the tree has to pump its energy into reproduction, fine root growth, defense compounds, and storage. And so we see increases in all of these other things that result in a higher amount of tree health. So increased root hairs, thicker leaf cuticles, more leaf hairs, increased chlorophyll, smaller stomates, smaller leaves, additional carbohydrate storage. All of these things happen from an application of Shortstop. And they're all mechanisms of drought resistance. Lots of opportunities for this product. Is probably one of the most influential products you can put onto a tree. When you think about plant health care from a really high up view, 20, 30,000 foot view, what are you trying to do? And most treatments, you're trying to affect the environment of a tree. Take deep root feeding, for example. You're trying to affect the environment. You're trying to pump things into the ground. Injecting a tree for insects. You're affecting what can feed on that tree. So it's outside. You're trying to affect the outside forces of a tree to leave it alone, basically. But with Shortstop, you are affecting the tree's health from the inside out. You are improving the tree's health so that other things can't bother it. And it's just really there's nothing else to my knowledge that can do that. So there's lots of opportunities out there. Pre and post construction is huge. Where I live in the DFW area, construction is probably the biggest threat to trees. And if you can get Shortstop onto trees before construction begins, it is just a lifesaver to that tree. Chlorosis, trees that are growing in small root zones, so like those parking lot island trees I showed is a great example. Harsh growing conditions, areas of drought, trees that are in decline. There's been research done on blue spruce and controlling or inhibiting Cytospora canker using Shortstop. Trees near structures, so you don't have to prune them as much. Maintaining a manicured appearance, so just keeping things the way they are. And then also drought tolerance. So drought, I get a lot of photos sent to me asking me if this is bacterial leaf scorch. And so here's some photos showing some examples of that. Leaf scorch photos. Leaf scorch happens when transpiration exceeds what the tree is pulling up in water. Transpiration exceeds water uptake. So here's some photos from Colorado. You can see in 2017, we have these trees on the left-hand side. All of them are scorched out. My colleague up there treated every other tree down the row with Paclobutrazol, and you can see that every other tree in 2019 has scorch. And so here's what we're looking at. The Paclobutrazol treated trees don't have the same scorch symptoms because they're much better at limiting their water and conserving it. The last thing I want to talk about is our new product line actually, called Arbor RX, which is for a fall root feeding. And this is root feeding is something that can be done fall, summer, spring. But this presentation is about fall. So a fall root feeding is a great time to get some carbon sources into the ground. So my background is in soil science, and I'm a big fan of feeding the microbiology in the soil, not only just giving trees the fertilizer that they need, but also feeding the microorganisms to improve the soil that the tree's growing in. And so we have a variety of products that can be used and you can tailor make a blend of these things for whatever your needs are. So just to run down a short list here, Arborplex is a 14-4-5 fertilizer. It has 50% slow release nitrogen with a combination of chelated micronutrients. BioMP is a molasses-based fertilizer, which I think is fantastic. Molasses really stimulates the soil microbiology. Enviroplex is 22% humic acid. Humic acid is fantastic. It is basically what compost breaks down into is humic acid. And so this is a liquid source of humic acid. It can really stimulate and generate the microbiology in the soil. Cytogrow is seaweed extract that stimulates root development. Seaweed extract is full of root hormones and can stimulate that fine root hair production. Hydratane is a unique technology that actually extends the availability of moisture in the soil. So very good for areas in drought or areas that experience winter desiccation. And then lastly is NutriRoot, which is kind of a combination of a lot of these different products put all in one package. So it has the 223 with micronutrients, it has Cytogrow in it, as well as Hydratane. And so Arborjet has really evolved over the years, especially in the past 6 years that I've been with the company, into a more of a full, complete plant healthcare line. And so the ArborX Arbor RX program is kind of the next evolution of that. And so we've got a lot of great products here. They're all liquids. They do not require mechanical agitation. Having been a plant healthcare technician for 4 years, I understand this stuff because a lot of the tree fertilizers out there do require mechanical agitation. They have water insoluble nitrogen, and that stuff just wrecks spray equipment. So these are all liquids, completely water soluble, very easy to use, very low mix rates. And so if this is something that you're interested in, please reach out. We'll be happy to talk to you about it. Some of the benefits of feeding trees in the fall is to replace depleted nutrients. The trees have been growing all year. They've been pulling things out of the soil. You can replace those in the fall. You can also store nutrients for spring growth, enhance the tree's vitality, feeding the soil microorganisms, and that's really what I try to promote. If you have a healthy soil and a healthy root system, more than likely you're going to have a healthy tree. Manage moisture to reduce winter desiccation. Improve establishment. This is a big thing that I see in Texas is newly planted trees that have declined. And so improve your establishment percentage, and also add a revenue opportunity. That's kind of what this presentation is geared around is, hey, what are the opportunities to make money in the fall, which is generally a slow season for tree care providers. And so a fall feeding program is a great way to do that. If you have any questions about what's in this presentation, or if I've piqued your interest in something and you want to know more about it, reach out to your RTM, Regional Technical Manager. Again, my name is Emmett. I am in the South Central area. We have people all across the United States. And save the Arborjet Support number in your phone, 781-935-9070. We have some great people up there on staff that will be happy to answer your questions. Zach is one of them, and just a lot of knowledge on how to use our equipment and products. And again, like I said, if you're on the East Coast and it's after hours and you need to get a hold of somebody, try to get a hold of somebody on the West Coast. We'd be happy to help you. Thank you.